Your skeleton is not the dry scaffolding it looks like in a diagram. It is living tissue that rebuilds itself in direct response to the force you put through it. And right now, with every step you take, it is taking a measurement. A bone is not a finished object. It is a structure under constant negotiation between the cells that build it and the cells that tear it down, and the deciding vote is cast by mechanical load. Walk across a room, and the impact of your heel against the floor sends a pulse of strain through the bone of your leg. That strain is not damage, it is information. Inside the bone, a network of sensor cells reads the magnitude of that pulse and uses it to decide whether to add material or remove it. Consider what this means. The thigh bone of a person who walks, climbs, and carries weight is measurably denser than the same bone in a person of the same age who sits. The difference is not genetic luck. It is the accumulated record of forces written into the mineral over years. The bone has been listening. It has heard either a steady demand for strength or a long silence, and it has built itself accordingly. A femur can carry loads in the range of several thousand newtons before it fails, but that capacity is not fixed at birth. It is maintained day by the signals you send it. This is the part that gets buried under the word osteocytes. People hear that word and picture a disease that arrives from outside, like an infection. It is closer to the truth to say the opposite. The thinning of bone after 50 is, in large part, the bone doing exactly what it was built to do, responding to a load that stopped arriving. Where there is no force, the structure has no reason to hold its mass, so it lets it go. The skeleton you have at 70 is not the skeleton time handed you. It is the skeleton your habits requested. What follows in this explanation is the physics of that request. How a network of cells buried inside solid bone can feel a footstep. Why a swimmer and a runner of the same age can have very different skeletons. Why the years after 50 turn a slow process into an urgent one. And what a body can do, at any age, to change the message the bones are receiving. None of this requires a prescription or a clinic. It requires understanding one mechanism and then giving it the one input it has been waiting for. Start with the number that frames the whole subject. The adult skeleton replaces roughly its entire mass over the span of about a decade. The bone in your arm is not the bone that was there 10 years ago. It has been quietly disassembled and rebuilt, atom by atom, while you were doing other things. That constant turnover is not a flaw. It is the opportunity. A structure that rebuilds itself can be steered. The question is only what signal does the steering. To see how a footstep becomes a command, look at who is doing the building and who is doing the demolition. Two populations of cells run the skeleton in opposition. One kind lays down new bone, secreting the protein framework and drawing in the calcium and phosphate that harden into mineral. The other kind dissolves old bone, releasing acid and enzymes that break the mineral back down. In a healthy adult, these two run in a careful balance, and the bone holds steady. Tip the balance toward building, and the bone thickens. Tip it toward dissolving, and it thins. Neither process ever stops. The skeleton is always being torn down and rebuilt at the same time. But these two cell types are workers, not managers. Something has to tell them which way to lean. That something is a third kind of cell, the most numerous in bone and the least talked about. These are the sensor cells, embedded throughout the solid mineral in a vast connected network, each one reaching out through tiny channels to touch its neighbors. They cannot move. They are walled into the bone they were once part of building, and from inside that wall, they do one essential job. They feel. When force passes through a bone, the bone bends. The bend is far too small to see, a fraction of a millimeter, but it is real, and it is measurable as strain. As the bone deforms, the fluid sitting in the microscopic channels around those sensor cells is squeezed and made to flow. The sensor cells feel that flow across their surfaces, the way you feel wind you cannot see by the pressure it puts on your skin. The signal may also carry a small electrical component, a faint current generated as the loaded bone is stressed, though the fluid movement appears to be the dominant cue. Either way, the deformation of the bone has been converted into a message the living cells can read. This is the core of it. The American orthopedic surgeon Harold Frost gave the system a name decades ago. He called it the mechanostat, by analogy with a thermostat. A thermostat reads temperature and switches the heating on or off to hold a set point. The mechanostat reads strain and switches bone building on or off to hold a set point of strength. When the daily strain runs high, the sensor cells call for more bone, and the structure thickens until the strain per step drops back into range. When the daily strain runs low, the call goes the other way, and bone is released until the remaining structure is once again working hard enough to justify itself. This is also why an old engineering observation, often credited to the anatomist Julius Wolff, holds up. Bone arranges its internal architecture along the lines of the forces it routinely carries. Load a bone in a new direction over time, and the internal struts reorganize to brace against that direction. The skeleton is not a passive frame. It is a self-tuning structure that reads its own loading and rebuilds to match. So when bone is lost after 50, the honest description is rarely that the bone broke down from age. It is that the signal calling for strength fell silent. To see the mechanostat at work, compare two people who both train hard for the same hours, with the same dedication, and end up with very different skeletons. Take a serious swimmer and a serious runner, matched in age and effort. The swimmer's heart, lungs, and muscles may be superb, but move to the hip and the spine, and the bone density of a lifelong swimmer often sits no higher, and sometimes lower, than that of someone who barely trains at all. The runner, pounding the ground for years, carries denser bone in the legs and hips. The difference is not fitness, it is impact. Water holds the body up. A swimmer's bones are never struck. The muscles pull, and muscle pull does send some strain into bone, but the sharp, high-rate jolt of a foot hitting the ground is absent. The same goes for cycling. The legs work hard, the lungs burn, but the skeleton glides, cushioned and unstruck, and so it receives a weak version of the signal that builds it. None of this makes swimming or cycling poor exercise. For the heart and the muscles, they are excellent. It only means that the specific input the skeleton requires, a sharp mechanical impact delivered against gravity, is not in those activities. The bone, listening for that jolt, hears very little. Accent color, #E64A19. Now take the most extreme case, where the silence is total. Put a healthy person on prolonged bed rest, or send an astronaut into orbit where gravity no longer loads the skeleton, and bone is lost at a striking rate, measured not over years, but over weeks. The structure has been told, in the only language it understands, that no force is coming, and it dismantles itself accordingly. The same machinery that quietly thins a sedentary skeleton over decades runs visibly fast when load is removed entirely. The lesson is the same at both speeds. Bone is expensive to carry, and a body does not keep what it is not asked to use. This is where the modern environment quietly works against the skeleton. For most of human history, staying alive meant walking long distances over hard ground, carrying loads, climbing and rising from the floor many times a day. Every one of those was an impact, a strain, a message to the bone to stay strong. A chair removes the rising. Smooth floors and soft shoes blunt the impact. A short, seated, cushioned day sends the skeleton a steady stream of one instruction. Stand down. The bone obeys. It was always going to obey. That is the only thing it knows how to do. Everything described so far runs the same way at every age. A bone reads its load and adjusts, building toward demand and releasing toward silence. The mechanism does not switch off when a person turns 50. What changes after 50 is not the existence of that mechanism, but the balance it settles into, and the change, quietly and steadily, is not in your favor. Begin with the building cells. Across adult life, their output gradually slows. The cells that dissolve old bone keep working at close to full pace, while the cells that lay down replacement bone become less productive. In a younger body, the two stay close enough that bone holds steady. With age, the gap opens, and over each passing decade, the steady state drifts slightly toward loss. On its own, this drift is slow, almost invisible, the kind of change that never announces itself until a scan or a break makes it plain. What makes the years around 50 sharp, particularly for women, is the loss of estrogen at menopause. Estrogen acts as a brake on the cells that dissolve bone. Remove that brake, and demolition speeds up while building does not. so the balance tips hard toward loss. In the first several years after menopause, bone can be shed at a rate several times faster than the slow background drift. A process that was quietly subtracting now subtracts in earnest. Men are not exempt. Their decline is steadier and arrives later, but it arrives, and it follows the same logic of a structure being maintained less and dismantled more. The danger is not the thinning itself. Thin bone causes no pain and gives no warning. The danger is what thin bone does when it meets a sudden load it can no longer carry. A stumble, a missed step, a fall against a hard floor. A skeleton with reserve absorbs the impact and holds. A skeleton that has been quietly dismantled for 20 years fractures. And the fractures that matter most are at the hip and the spine, the very structures that hold a person upright and let them move through the world on their own. Here, the numbers stop being abstract. A broken wrist heals and is forgotten. A broken hip in an older adult is a different kind of event. It often means surgery, a long loss of mobility, and a real share of people who never return to walking the way they did before. The chain that follows a hip fracture, immobility, lost strength, lost independence, carries a mortality in the year afterward that is far higher than most people expect from what sounds like a single broken bone. The fracture is the visible event. The 2 silent decades of unanswered signal are what set it up. This is the inversion worth holding on to. The fracture at 70 is not for most people an accident that struck from outside. It is the predictable end of a long conversation in which the bone kept asking for a reason to stay strong and the body kept failing to give it one. The bone did not fail from age. It thinned from the absence of the load that maintains it, and then it met a force it could no longer answer. So the message the bones are receiving can be changed, and the way to change it is to give them, on purpose, the one signal the modern day has removed. The signal is impact, force delivered sharply against gravity, and the dose required is smaller than most people imagine. What matters is the size of the load, not the length of time spent under it. Start with the floor of it, which costs nothing. Walking is the baseline. The heel strike of an ordinary walk sends real impact into the leg and hip, far more than sitting and far more than swimming. And a daily walk on hard ground is the simplest standing instruction a skeleton can receive. But walking alone reaches a ceiling. The body adapts to a familiar load, the strain per step falls into the comfortable range, and the mechanostat stops calling for more. To keep building, the signal has to rise above what the bone has grown used to. That is where deliberate impact comes in. For a body that is healthy and cleared for it, short bouts of higher force do what steady walking cannot. A set of firm heel raises dropped onto the floor, a few low hops, a step down that lands with intent. These deliver brief spikes of strain that sit above the everyday range, and it is precisely those spikes the sensor cells respond to. The research on this points in a consistent direction. The benefit comes from the height and sharpness of the load, not from its duration. A small number of solid impacts, a few times through the day, carries more of the building signal than a long session of gentle motion. The skeleton counts peaks, not minutes. Alongside impact sits resistance, and it has to progress. Lifting a weight loads bone through the pull of muscle, and that pull is a genuine building stimulus, but only if it keeps climbing. A weight the body has adapted to sends a strain the bone already considers normal, and a normal strain calls for nothing new. The load has to rise over time, gradually and with control, so the bone is repeatedly asked for slightly more than it currently provides. Direction matters too. Bone strengthens along the lines it is loaded, so a varied set of movements braces the structure more completely than a single repeated motion. Around the mechanical signal sit the materials the building cells need. Bone is a protein framework hardened with calcium, and the cells need adequate protein, enough calcium, and enough vitamin D to turn a building instruction into actual mineral. These are the supplies, not the command. No quantity of calcium tells a bone to grow, and no impact builds bone the body lacks the materials to make. The signal directs the work, the nutrients allow it. One honest caution belongs at the center of this, not the edge. For a person who already has significant bone loss or a known high risk of fracture, the sharp impact and heavy loading described here can be the wrong starting point and must be cleared and shaped by a physician or a physical therapist first. None of this is a diagnosis, and the bone scan that measures density is a separate matter to take up with a clinician. The principle holds at every level of risk. The safe application of it does not. The person whose skeleton most needs the signal is often the one who must approach it with the most care, and there is no contradiction in that. There is one more input that protects the skeleton without touching it, and that is balance. The strongest bone in the world does not help if a fall delivers a load no skeleton could survive. Training balance, standing steady, shifting weight, holding the body's center under control lowers the chance the fall ever happens. Strong bone and steady footing are two halves of the same defense. One raises what the skeleton can absorb. The other lowers what it is ever asked to. Step back from the protocol and the picture is simple. And it is the same picture Feynman insisted on for every system worth understanding. You do not need to memorize the cells or the numbers. You need to hold one idea. The skeleton is not a fixed frame that erodes with the years. It is a living, listening structure that rebuilds itself continuously, and it builds itself to fit the forces it is asked to carry. That is why the same act has two outcomes. A life of sitting, smooth floors, and cushioned ease sends the bone a single quiet message that no demand is coming, and the bone, doing the only thing it knows, releases the strength it has no reason to keep. A life that keeps delivering impact against gravity in doses the bone can read sends the opposite message. That strength is still required, and the bone answers by holding and rebuilding. The mineral in your hip is not a relic of how old you are. It is a current report on how you have been moving. So the next time a foot meets the floor, consider what is actually happening underneath. A pulse of force runs up through the bone. A network of cells walled inside that bone feels the fluid move and reads the size of the load. And somewhere in the balance between building and dissolving, a small decision is made to keep this much strength or to let a little of it go. That decision is being made constantly, at every age, with or without your attention. The body does not maintain its skeleton automatically. It maintains it in response to the forces sent through it. The bones are listening to every step. The only question is what they are being told.